April 12, 1945. Skies over Okinawa, Japan. The sun reflected off the turquoise waters of the East China Sea, turning the waves into shards of glass. Above, the air was alive with smoke trails and engine roar. F-6F Hellcats from the U.S. Navy streaked through the clouds, diving and banking to intercept incoming Japanese Zeros. Flames painted arcs across the sky. Each burst a deadly signature of dogfights unfolding in 3 dimensions. Lieutenant James Jimmy Caldwell's Hellcat shuddered as he felt the first tracers streak past his canopy. Enemy fighters swarmed, agile, lethal, and relentless. Most pilots reacted predictably. Barrel rolls, evasive banking, zigzag dives. But Caldwell had something else in mind. He pushed the stick forward and executed a daring backward dive, an unorthodox maneuver that threw physics and instinct against the enemy. In seconds, Japanese Zeros chasing him over the northern ridge found themselves overshooting, exposed, and caught in his gunfire. Flames erupted in the sky, silhouettes of once feared fighters spinning down toward the ocean. His squadron watched in awe. They had never seen a maneuver so audacious and so devastating. In that fleeting moment, one pilot turned desperation into opportunity and transformed a chaotic dogfight into a cascade of falling fire. By April 1945, Okinawa had become the focal point of one of the fiercest battles in the Pacific. The island's capture was critical for the United States' plans to stage a potential invasion of the Japanese home. Islands, U.S. forces relied heavily on air superiority to support ground operations and to suppress kamikaze attacks targeting ships and troops. Every sortie mattered. Every pilot's skill could tip the balance between survival and catastrophic loss. Japanese air forces, despite dwindling numbers and exhausted pilots, remained formidable. The Mitsubishi A6M-0, famed for its maneuverability and climb rate, continued to challenge Allied aircraft. While increasingly outdated in armor and firepower compared to the Hellcat or Corsair, the Zero's agility allowed skilled pilots to exploit any mistake. By mid-April, Japanese squadrons had intensified night raids and sudden intercepts, seeking to disrupt American operations over Okinawa and delay the inevitable. U.S. pilots, meanwhile, had to adapt constantly. Dogfights were no longer about raw skill alone. They required an understanding of aircraft limitations, enemy psychology, and split-second tactical innovation. Standard procedures, banking, climbing, and coordinated squadron attacks were essential but insufficient against the increasingly desperate tactics employed by Japanese aviators. Improvisation became a survival skill. The Hellcat, with superior armor and firepower, had advantages, but pilots were often outnumbered. Flying over the jagged terrain of Okinawa, they had to navigate sudden wind gusts, unpredictable cloud cover, and the constant threat of enemy fighters diving from above. Every pilot understood that a single misjudgment could end in flames over the ocean. Lieutenant Caldwell, stationed aboard the USS Enterprise, had flown hundreds of sorties leading up to this engagement. His experience gave him confidence, but the stakes were unprecedented. Squadron intelligence warned of an incoming formation of over a dozen Zeros. Young pilots trained quickly, often with minimal combat experience, yet dangerously unpredictable in their maneuvers. Fuel was a constant concern. Okinawa's airstrips were forward deployed but vulnerable to strafing and bombardment. Each Hellcat carried limited ammunition. Once expended, pilots relied on escape maneuvers or the protective cover of carrier-based wingmen. The engagement over Okinawa would test not only Caldwell's flying skill, but also his ability to innovate in the moment, to push aircraft and human reflexes beyond standard combat doctrine. Within this environment, the stage was set for a singular moment of aerial ingenuity. The combination of tactical necessity, high-stakes pressure, and pilot experience created conditions where unconventional maneuvers could decide the outcome. Caldwell's backward dive would emerge not from textbook training, but from instinct, daring, and a profound understanding of both his aircraft and the enemy's limitations. The sky over Okinawa was more than a battlefield. It was a chessboard of speed, altitude, and angle. Every pilot had to anticipate the next move of both friend and foe. Those who adapted quickly survived. Those who did not became statistics in the growing tally of the Pacific War. The encounter that would define Caldwell's reputation began as a seemingly routine interception, yet would evolve into a masterclass of improvisation and audacity, transforming the chaos of aerial combat into a sequence of precise destruction. The Battle of Okinawa represented the culmination of years of air combat evolution in the Pacific. By early 1945, American pilots had learned to exploit the Hellcat's superior speed, firepower, and armor. They had refined tactics against the Zero, which excelled in agility but suffered in durability and firepower. U.S. Navy training emphasized coordinated attacks, energy management, and predictive positioning, all vital when facing numbers of Japanese aircraft that sometimes exceeded squadron strength. Despite training, the human element remained unpredictable. Young Japanese pilots, indoctrinated in Bushido and kamikaze doctrine, often flew with reckless courage. Their objective was not merely to survive, but to inflict maximum damage, even at the cost of their own lives. Intercepting these pilots required constant vigilance and an acute understanding of behavioral patterns. Caldwell and his wingmen were briefed on these tendencies, yet experience could only account for so much. In the fluidity of aerial combat, improvisation was often the deciding factor. Aircraft limitations further complicated engagements. The Zero's light frame allowed incredible maneuverability, but left it vulnerable to concentrated fire. Conversely, the Hellcat could absorb hits and maintain stability, but was less nimble in tight turns. Pilots had to exploit these differences rapidly, recognizing that traditional dogfighting maneuvers could backfire if misapplied. Every second of miscalculation could be fatal. Fuel and ammunition constraints added additional pressure. Carrier-based operations demanded careful timing. Sorties could not last indefinitely. The risk of running low over open ocean was lethal. Pilots like Caldwell calculated their maneuvers not just to engage the enemy, but to conserve resources, a task requiring both technical skill and instant judgment. Squadron coordination was also essential. Wingmen relied on visual cues and brief radio bursts to maintain formation integrity. Any unexpected maneuver, while potentially advantageous, carried risk of collision or miscommunication. Caldwell's decision to execute a backward dive required trust in both his aircraft and his squadron. Because the maneuver departed entirely from standard doctrine, his wingmen had to adapt instantaneously, anticipating the result of a maneuver few had ever attempted. The Japanese had one advantage: surprise. Flying in small, coordinated waves, they sought to overwhelm pilots by forcing split-second decisions. Yet by 1945, American pilots had learned to anticipate the most common attack patterns. Still, the unconventional backward dive would exploit gaps in both expectation and reaction time, transforming Caldwell's ingenuity into a force multiplier. Environmental conditions played a critical role. Okinawa's skies were often hazy, cloud formations unpredictable, and sun glare could obscure vision at critical moments. Pilots were trained to use altitude and terrain shadows to their advantage. Caldwell would use these factors not as passive elements but as active tools, enhancing the effectiveness of his unexpected maneuver. By mid-April, the skies over Okinawa had become a proving ground for aerial skill, improvisation, and psychological endurance. Every engagement offered lessons for both sides. The convergence of training, experience, environmental conditions, and enemy behavior set the stage for Caldwell to execute a maneuver that would redefine perceptions of risk, skill, and tactical possibility in the Pacific theater. As the formation of Japanese Zeros approached the fleet, the conditions were perfect for a single pilot's audacity to alter the course of a skirmish. The interplay between aircraft capability, pilot experience, and split-second decision-making created a scenario where one unconventional move, the backward dive, could produce cascading results in both destruction and morale. Caldwell's moment was imminent. The calm before the storm, the calculated anticipation, and the understanding of both aircraft and enemy behavior would culminate in a series of events that left a lasting mark on aerial combat. History over Okinawa, combat aviation is as much about instinct as it is about machinery. For Lieutenant James Caldwell, each sortie carried the weight of survival, duty, and the responsibility for his fellow pilots. Flying over Okinawa, he faced more than the technical challenge of controlling a Hellcat. He confronted the psychological pressure of life-and-death decisions executed in fractions of a second. The enemy was fast, aggressive, and unpredictable. Hesitation could be fatal. Caldwell's backward dive was not a maneuver taught in manuals or flight school. It arose from intuition honed through hundreds of sorties. He understood how both his aircraft and the enemy would react under stress. Executing the dive required absolute trust in his reflexes, timing, and the tolerances of the Hellcat. For the crew and squadron observing him, it was an audacious risk, one that demanded courage and conviction. Every pilot flying over Okinawa shared the same fear and exhilaration. Death could come from a well-aimed cannon, or from environmental factors like glare or turbulence. In this context, human ingenuity became as vital as training. Caldwell's willingness to test the limits of the aircraft in real time illustrates the unique human dimension of aerial warfare: adaptability, courage, and rapid problem-solving under pressure. The psychological impact extended beyond Caldwell. Witnessing a pilot defy conventional tactics and succeed created a morale surge among the squadron. Confidence, once shattered by repeated kamikaze attacks, was renewed. Human ingenuity, in this case, became a weapon equal to machine guns and cannons. The tactical significance of Caldwell's maneuver was immediate and far-reaching. Japanese Zeros relied on predictable attack vectors, banking maneuvers, and wing coordination. By executing a backward dive, Caldwell forced the enemy to misjudge speed, trajectory, and engagement timing. Zeros overshot their targets, exposing themselves to concentrated gunfire from the Hellcat. Positioning in aerial combat is a delicate balance of altitude, angle, and velocity. Caldwell's dive disrupted these variables, granting him a temporary but critical tactical advantage. One unexpected maneuver could disrupt an entire formation, forcing enemy pilots into defensive actions and creating openings for Allied wingmen to exploit. The maneuver also conserved energy. In dogfights, altitude and speed translate directly to combat potential. Caldwell's backward dive allowed him to regain positional advantage without excessive climbs or turns, maximizing his aircraft's kinetic energy while minimizing exposure to return fire. Tactically, it demonstrated that unconventional maneuvers could achieve effects beyond conventional doctrine. Wingmen had to adapt as well. The squadron's ability to recognize and respond to Caldwell's unconventional dive ensured that the tactical advantage was magnified. Communication, situational awareness, and split-second coordination made the maneuver effective, not just individually, but at the formation level. The Hellcat was built for survivability and firepower, designed to outperform the Zero in armor and overall combat durability. Yet technological superiority alone does not ensure victory. Caldwell's success depended on exploiting the aircraft's strengths: robust structure, stable handling, and powerful 650 caliber machine guns, while mitigating its limitations in maneuverability relative to the nimble Zero. Understanding these technological nuances allowed Caldwell to innovate. The backward dive relied on the Hellcat's ability to maintain structural integrity during abrupt attitude changes, and on its predictable gun convergence pattern. By anticipating the mechanical response of the aircraft, Caldwell turned technology into an extension of human reflexes, rather than a limiting factor. This interplay between machine and pilot underscores a central principle of air combat. Technology is only decisive when coupled with creativity, experience, and rapid decision-making. Caldwell exemplified this synergy, achieving results that conventional tactics could not have produced. From the Japanese perspective, Caldwell's maneuver was unexpected and disorienting. Zeros, conditioned to exploit agility and predictable enemy behavior, suddenly encountered a Hellcat behaving contrary to expectation. Many enemy pilots overshot their targets, leaving themselves vulnerable to counterattack. The psychological effect on the Japanese pilots was profound. Inexperienced aviators, already under pressure from attrition and exhaustion, hesitated in critical moments. Even veteran pilots had to reassess their approach mid-flight. The backward dive disrupted formation cohesion, reducing the effectiveness of concentrated attacks and contributing directly to the loss of multiple aircraft during the engagement. The tactic demonstrated a key limitation of Japanese air doctrine: rigid adherence to training patterns. When confronted with an unpredictable variable, their response was slower, less coordinated, and ultimately more costly. Caldwell's audacity exploited this flaw, illustrating how innovation can create outsized effects in aerial combat. Leadership in aerial combat extends beyond rank and orders. It is also demonstrated through example, courage, and initiative. Lieutenant Caldwell's decision to attempt the backward dive illustrated this principle. By acting decisively and confidently, he set a standard for his squadron, showing that innovation and calculated risk-taking were not just acceptable, but essential under high-stakes conditions. Squadron cohesion depended on trust. Wingmen had to anticipate Caldwell's actions and adjust their own positions in real time. His leadership was thus both direct and indirect. Direct in the execution of an effective attack. Indirect in demonstrating the value of adaptability and composure under pressure. Leadership in these moments often meant the difference between a coordinated victory and chaotic losses. This approach reinforced the notion that combat leadership is dynamic. Formal tactics provide structure, but individuals must adapt rapidly to evolving threats. Caldwell's maneuver inspired others to trust their own judgment, creating a feedback loop of confidence and creativity that extended throughout the squadron. Caldwell's backward dive also carried a moral dimension. Each decision in aerial combat has ethical and practical implications. The imperative to protect fellow pilots and ground forces weighed heavily. By innovating, Caldwell minimized exposure for his wingmen and maximized the defensive potential of his attack. Morality, in this context, was intertwined with responsibility and professional duty. The act of taking calculated risk to preserve life and achieve mission objectives underscores the human element of warfare. Caldwell's maneuver exemplified courage not born of recklessness, but of disciplined judgment. This moral layer distinguishes skillful command from mere survival instinct. The backward dive disrupted enemy formations, forcing Japanese pilots into reactive maneuvers. With multiple aircraft overshooting or misaligned, Caldwell's squadron could engage targets more effectively. Tactical advantage in aerial combat is ephemeral. It exists in moments where positioning, speed, and altitude converge perfectly. Caldwell's audacious maneuver created such a moment repeatedly during the engagement. Each Zero forced into a defensive posture became a target for Allied fire. Caldwell's action did not merely protect himself, it amplified the combat effectiveness of the entire squadron. Tactical innovation, therefore, had a multiplicative effect, transforming a single daring move into broader operational success. The encounter also highlighted the interplay between machine limitations and pilot ingenuity. While the Zero could outmaneuver the Hellcat in certain conditions, Caldwell exploited predictable weaknesses: overconfidence in speed, angle of attack, and response delay. Understanding both the enemy's and his own aircraft's technological constraints enabled him to convert relative disadvantage into decisive advantage. Aircraft modifications, such as gun convergence and throttle response tuning, were subtly factored into Caldwell's maneuver. These technical considerations, while minor individually, cumulatively amplified the effectiveness of the backward dive. It was a testament to how intimate knowledge of equipment can enhance combat potential far beyond standard expectations. The maneuver had profound psychological consequences. Japanese pilots, initially confident, experienced sudden, disorienting losses. Their formation cohesion broke under unexpected stress, and morale deteriorated in real time. Conversely, Allied pilots witnessing Caldwell's feat gained renewed confidence, realizing that ingenuity could offset numerical or skill disadvantages. In warfare, the psychological dimension is as decisive as kinetic force. Caldwell's backward dive imposed uncertainty and hesitation upon the enemy while inspiring initiative and aggressiveness in his squadron. The human mind, stressed by unanticipated variables, often dictates battlefield outcomes as much as weapon systems do. By blending human skill, tactical innovation, and technological awareness, Caldwell transformed a single aerial engagement into a multidimensional event. His maneuver affected not only immediate combat outcomes, but also the broader operational and psychological landscape of the Okinawa Air Theater. April 12, 1945. Mid-morning over northern Okinawa. Lieutenant Caldwell's squadron patrolled above a patchwork of farmland and jungle ridges, scanning the horizon for incoming Japanese Zeros. Reports from radar pickets indicated an approaching formation of 12 enemy fighters, descending in a loose V formation. Adrenaline surged as the familiar roar of engines grew louder, punctuated by distant tracer fire. Caldwell's Hellcat shuddered as he tightened his grip on the control stick. His training had prepared him for this moment, but instinct demanded a maneuver beyond standard doctrine. With a glance to his wingmen and a mental calculation of altitude, speed, and enemy vector, he pushed forward and initiated the backward dive, a maneuver that inverted the typical attack pattern and caught the enemy off guard. The first Zero, closing fast on his tail, misjudged the dive's trajectory. It overshot, passing directly beneath Caldwell's Hellcat. In seconds, the machine guns roared. Tracers stitched across the sky, puncturing the enemy aircraft. Flames erupted from the fuselage, smoke trailing as the Zero spiraled down toward the ocean below. Wingmen reacted instantaneously, following Caldwell's lead, targeting the exposed enemies now forced into defensive postures. Another Zero, attempting to intercept Caldwell during the dive, was forced into a sudden climbing turn to avoid collision. The abrupt maneuver exposed its side armor, and Sergeant Hawkins, Caldwell's wingman, delivered precise fire, igniting the engine. Within minutes, 2 Zeros had been neutralized, and the remaining formation was in disarray. Caldwell's backward dive had disrupted their coordination, a single pilot dictating the flow of the engagement. The maneuver required careful balance. Too steep a dive risked structural failure or loss of control. Too shallow, and the enemy would adjust. Caldwell adjusted throttle and elevator subtly, maintaining optimal angle while tracking the next target. His instincts guided every decision. Milliseconds could determine life or death. By mid-morning, Caldwell had executed multiple backward dives, each time disorienting enemy formations. Flames streaked across the sky as Zeros fell, either destroyed or forced into evasive maneuvers that left them vulnerable to wingmen fire. The psychological impact was evident. Japanese pilots hesitated, misjudging speed and position, unsure of what Caldwell would do next. Despite the chaos, Caldwell maintained situational awareness. Altitude, ammunition, fuel, every factor was under constant calculation. The maneuver was not reckless. It was precise, executed under extreme pressure. Each backward dive created openings, forcing enemies to respond reactively rather than proactively. Allied pilots seized these opportunities, maximizing effectiveness. During one critical moment, a pair of Zeros attempted a coordinated attack from the left flank. Caldwell's dive forced the lead Zero to overshoot, exposing both aircraft to crossfire. Flames erupted, and the enemy formation splintered. Wingmen moved in to exploit the gap, while Caldwell adjusted position, preparing for the next engagement. By late morning, the battlefield in the sky had shifted. One pilot's audacious maneuver had turned the tide of a skirmish. The remaining enemy aircraft broke formation, retreating toward higher altitude where their approach could be reassessed. Caldwell's squadron maintained dominance, their confidence bolstered, and the enemy morale fractured. The backward dive, once an untested tactic, had proven decisive. What began as a single intercept mission had evolved into a calculated demonstration of human skill, technological understanding, and tactical innovation. Caldwell's maneuver reshaped the air battle over northern Okinawa, leaving Japanese forces scrambling and Allied pilots inspired. The engagement escalated as Caldwell's squadron pressed the attack. Japanese Zeros, initially confident, now moved with hesitation, their formation disrupted by the audacity of the backward dive. Caldwell's Hellcat remained a pivot around which the aerial skirmish rotated. Each dive forced enemy pilots into defensive positions, exposing vulnerabilities and creating cascading opportunities for his wingmen. In one sequence, 3 Zeros attempted to converge on Caldwell simultaneously. Executing a precise backward dive, he inverted the expected attack pattern, causing the lead Zero to overshoot and the others to misalign. Flames erupted from the engines of 2 aircraft, trailing smoke as they plummeted toward the sea. The remaining fighter, now isolated, became an easy target for crossfire. Within minutes, Caldwell had neutralized half of the enemy formation without breaking altitude significantly. Timing was everything. Caldwell adjusted throttle and rudder delicately, maintaining aircraft stability while creating unpredictable vectors for the enemy. His situational awareness extended beyond immediate threats. He monitored wingmen positions, enemy spacing, and the proximity of the ocean. The backward dive demanded a synthesis of mechanical understanding and instinctive anticipation, a maneuver both precise and improvisational. The Japanese pilots attempted to regroup, but Caldwell's repeated dives and unpredictable movements prevented the formation from reorganizing. Wingmen followed his lead, attacking exposed aircraft. A combination of superior firepower, structural resilience, and tactical audacity created a multiplying effect, allowing the squadron to dominate the engagement despite being outnumbered initially. At one point, a Zero approached from Caldwell's right flank, banking sharply to intercept. Caldwell inverted into a near-vertical backward dive, forcing the enemy past his firing arc. The machine guns tracked the retreating aircraft. A brief burst ignited the fuselage. The remaining Zeros, witnessing the destruction, began evasive maneuvers, unable to counter the rapid shifts in attack vector. The maneuver also served a defensive purpose. By constantly changing altitude and approach angles, Caldwell avoided predictable flight paths, reducing the risk of incoming fire. His aggressive backward dives created zones of control in the sky, where enemy pilots were effectively trapped between their own miscalculations and Allied firepower. Throughout the engagement, Caldwell's discipline and training were evident. He managed ammunition carefully, conserving rounds for maximum effect while maintaining offensive pressure. Fuel considerations were critical. Executing multiple dives at high throttle could deplete reserves quickly. Yet Caldwell balanced aggression with calculated economy. The maneuver was as much a test of endurance as skill. By mid-afternoon, the Japanese formation had disintegrated. Only a few Zeros remained in organized flight. Others had been destroyed or forced into retreat. Allied pilots seized control of the sky, ensuring air superiority for the ongoing ground operations. Caldwell's backward dive, initially an unconventional gamble, had become the linchpin of the engagement. The psychological impact extended beyond the immediate skirmish. Reports from squadron pilots emphasized the disorientation of the Japanese. Repeated exposure to Caldwell's unexpected maneuvers forced hesitation, misjudgment, and a loss of coordinated aggression. For Allied air crews, the engagement served as a lesson in creativity, courage, and the decisive influence of individual initiative. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the skies over northern Okinawa bore the scars of battle. Smoke trails, burning wrecks, and distant tracers fading into the distance. Caldwell's daring maneuver had turned a routine interception into a dramatic demonstration of skill and ingenuity. The backward dive had not only destroyed enemy aircraft, but also reshaped tactical understanding for the squadron, proving that innovation in aerial combat could yield outsized results. By late afternoon, the skies over northern Okinawa had cleared, leaving behind the quiet evidence of battle. Caldwell's squadron, though fatigued, had emerged largely unscathed. Enemy aircraft lay scattered across the horizon, burning in spirals or sinking into the East China Sea. The backward dive had not only disrupted the Japanese formation, but had inflicted significant losses, turning what could have been a perilous engagement into a decisive tactical victory. Reports filed aboard the USS Enterprise highlighted the unusual effectiveness of Caldwell's maneuver. Field notes described the backward dive as unexpected, unconventional, yet devastatingly effective, emphasizing how one pilot's ingenuity could shape the outcome of an aerial engagement. While standard training emphasized predictable attack vectors, Caldwell had demonstrated that calculated deviation could yield superior results. The physical toll on the Hellcat was minor, yet the psychological effect on both sides was profound. Allied pilots, inspired by the audacity and precision, gained renewed confidence. Morale, a crucial factor in sustained operations, soared within the squadron. Young aviators, many facing their first major engagement, witnessed firsthand how skill and creativity could overcome numerical or tactical disadvantage. Japanese pilots, conversely, experienced disorientation and hesitation. The backward dive disrupted their formation, leaving openings exploited by Allied wingmen. Command reports later noted that confusion among enemy pilots contributed as much to aircraft losses as direct gunfire. The maneuver revealed a critical weakness in Japanese aerial doctrine. Their reliance on predictable patterns and group cohesion made them vulnerable to innovative tactics executed with precision. Caldwell's squadron continued to patrol the skies, securing air superiority for the ground forces advancing toward strategic positions on Okinawa. The backward dive, though initially unplanned, became a model for improvisation. Pilots began discussing variations of the maneuver, integrating aspects into broader tactical considerations. The incident underscored the value of adaptive thinking in the fast-paced environment of aerial combat. Additionally, operational communications reflected the wider implications. Squadron leaders emphasized that innovation at the individual level could significantly enhance overall mission effectiveness. While doctrine and coordination remained foundational, flexibility and initiative were recognized as force multipliers. Caldwell's action became an informal teaching tool, illustrating that audacity combined with technical mastery could redefine engagement outcomes. The immediate aftermath was measured not just in destroyed enemy aircraft, but in the protection afforded to fellow pilots, the preservation of operational tempo, and the psychological boost provided to the squadron. Caldwell's backward dive had altered the dynamics of the skirmish, demonstrating the importance of initiative, situational awareness, and rapid decision-making under fire. By evening, the pilots reflected on the engagement. Reports, Debriefings and personal accounts emphasized that the backward dive had been both a gamble and a calculated strategy, exploiting aircraft capabilities, environmental factors, and enemy vulnerabilities. The impact extended beyond the single skirmish. It informed subsequent sorties, improved coordination, and reinforced the importance of creative problem-solving in aerial combat. Caldwell, humble yet aware of the maneuver's significance, recognized that victory depended on more than skill alone. The alignment of aircraft capability, human ingenuity, and tactical opportunity had produced results disproportionate to the scale of the engagement. The backward dive would be remembered not as reckless bravado, but as an example of effective innovation under pressure. The broader impact of Caldwell's backward dive extended beyond a single engagement. Squadron debriefings emphasized that individual initiative could decisively influence aerial combat, even when facing numerically superior or aggressive enemies. His maneuver became a case study in adaptive tactics, illustrating that unconventional decisions could create disproportionate effects on both enemy formations and overall mission success. Japanese losses during the encounter were significant. Several Zeros had been destroyed outright, while others were forced to retreat in disarray. The disruption inflicted by Caldwell's backward dive diminished their operational cohesion, delaying follow-up attacks and reducing their threat to carrier-based aircraft and ground forces. Intelligence reports noted that the unexpected maneuver had a cascading effect. Hesitation among Japanese pilots amplified Allied tactical advantages in subsequent sorties over Okinawa. Allied morale benefited as much as the tactical outcome. Pilots witnessing Caldwell's daring exploits gained confidence in their own abilities and in the squadron's operational flexibility. The psychological boost extended beyond immediate combat. Stories of the backward dive spread among carriers, boosting the esprit de corps across multiple squadrons. Young aviators learned that skill and ingenuity could equalize disparities in numbers or aircraft performance, reinforcing the value of personal initiative. Technological considerations remained central. Caldwell's intimate understanding of the Hellcat's flight characteristics, speed, structural limits, and gun convergence allowed him to execute the backward dive without endangering himself or the aircraft. This synergy between human skill and machine capability highlighted a critical principle of air combat. Technology achieves its full potential only when combined with experience, intuition, and tactical creativity. Field reports subsequently emphasized training adjustments. Instructors encouraged pilots to explore unconventional maneuvers within controlled exercises, stressing the importance of adaptability in dynamic combat scenarios. Caldwell's backward dive was analyzed not as an isolated stunt, but as a tactical innovation with replicable elements, demonstrating how risk, when calculated, could yield tangible battlefield advantages. The operational consequences were also measurable. Allied air superiority over Okinawa was reinforced, allowing bombing runs and reconnaissance missions to proceed with reduced interference. Ground forces advanced more confidently, supported by the assurance that the skies were largely controlled. Caldwell's maneuver, while seemingly singular, contributed to the broader strategic objective by stabilizing airspace and shaping enemy responses. Even after the engagement, the psychological imprint persisted. Enemy pilots, aware that a single Hellcat could employ unpredictable maneuvers, approached subsequent sorties with heightened caution. Allied intelligence noted that hesitation and miscalculations became increasingly common among Japanese air units facing seasoned Hellcat pilots. The backward dive's impact, therefore, was both kinetic and cognitive, reshaping the mental calculus of aerial engagements. Caldwell's squadron incorporated lessons from the encounter into ongoing operations. Training emphasized situational awareness, creative exploitation of aircraft capabilities, and coordinated improvisation with wingmen. The backward dive became emblematic of a philosophy: Success in aerial combat relies on the interplay of skill, initiative, and understanding of both enemy and machine. By evening, Okinawa's skies were quiet. Smoke from distant fires drifted lazily across the horizon, a silent testament to the day's engagement. Caldwell and his squadron had survived, inflicted losses, and demonstrated that audacity, when guided by skill and judgment, could transform risk into decisive advantage. The backward dive had achieved more than destruction. It had redefined the tactical and psychological landscape of aerial combat over Okinawa. Lieutenant Caldwell's backward dive over Okinawa stands as a testament to the power of human ingenuity in the midst of war. In a conflict dominated by technological innovation, superior numbers, and strategic planning, one pilot's audacity proved that creativity and skill could reshape the battlefield. His maneuver transformed a routine interception into a defining moment of aerial combat. The episode highlights a critical truth about warfare. Success depends not solely on machines or numbers, but on the ability to think and act decisively under pressure. Caldwell's understanding of his Hellcat's capabilities, coupled with his anticipation of enemy behavior, allowed him to exploit vulnerabilities in real time. The backward dive was not reckless. It was a calculated blend of instinct, training, and intuition. Beyond the immediate tactical outcome, the maneuver carried profound psychological and operational implications. Allied pilots gained confidence, inspired by the demonstration that one individual could influence the flow of combat. Japanese pilots, confronted with unpredictability, hesitated, misjudged their responses, and suffered both material and morale losses. The backward dive became more than a physical action. It was a force multiplier, shaping the perceptions and actions of friend and foe alike. The encounter over Okinawa also underscores the intimate relationship between human and machine in aerial warfare. Aircraft achieve their full potential only when guided by skill, experience, and adaptability. Caldwell's maneuver exemplified this principle, demonstrating that technology amplifies ingenuity rather than replaces it. Finally, the backward dive serves as a lasting lesson in the value of initiative. In war, rigid adherence to doctrine can be deadly. Innovation, courage, and situational awareness can redefine outcomes. Caldwell's daring flight, executed in seconds amidst the chaos of combat, reminds us that history is often shaped in fleeting moments where human skill meets opportunity. In the smoke-streaked skies of Okinawa, one pilot's audacity turned danger into advantage, destruction into a demonstration of mastery, and ordinary aircraft into instruments of extraordinary impact. Caldwell's backward dive remains a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the enduring influence of individual action in the theater of war.